Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over Tropical Storm Elsa, which is currently over the Carolinas where we already have a tornado watch. We're also going to be covering its progression to the north, where we already have tropical storm warnings going from North Carolina all the way up to New England, and we already have the possibility of seeing potentially high tropical storm force winds or even hurricane force winds in some of these areas in parts of southeastern Massachusetts or even parts of the coastal mid-Atlantic. So some of these areas closer to the coast do have the threat of seeing some pretty high winds out of this, as well as the threat of flash flooding, especially for areas that are just a little bit inland of the coast. So we're going to be talking about all of that and more in today's video. So let's get right into it here by starting off with the current National Weather Service page. As you can see, we have some red flag warnings in effect for parts of the Northwest and the Northern Rockies, with excessive heat warnings in through the southwest. We have some heat advisories in the orange scattered throughout the west, and then we have a few excessive heat watches in parts of Idaho and Oregon. We have some flood watches in southern Texas as well as all along the east coast in that green color. We have tornado watches in that yellow, which is in southeastern North Carolina. And then all up and down the east coast from parts of southeastern Massachusetts all the way down through the mid-Atlantic and then into parts of North Carolina, and even much of the coastal waters as well, stretching all the way down to the coastal waters of South Carolina, are also covered in tropical storm warnings as of right now. And underneath there, we even have a few heat advisories still mixed in over some of those areas. Yesterday, we had a high temperature of 126 degrees in Death Valley, California, and we only had a low temperature of 42 degrees, which is actually quite warm for that area in Peter Sinks, Utah. The highest rainfall report was in Northport, Florida, where they got 10.86 inches of rainfall, and there were no snowfall reports as of yesterday. Taking a look at the current surface plot, the official plot of this is in northern South Carolina, but if we look at the radar imagery, which we are going to look at in a little bit, most of the actual convective activity is in North Carolina as of right now with all the rain. To the south, it's actually quite dry, and it's almost starting to clear out in terms of the skies in those areas. So it's much more impactful on the northern end of things. If we look at the location, it's at 34.2 degrees north by 80.5 degrees west. Maximum winds of only 40 miles per hour. It may strengthen a little bit, and I think it probably will strengthen as it's going into areas like southeastern Virginia, and as it's getting off the shore of the mid-Atlantic. We're expecting those winds to ramp up quite significantly, probably by an extra 20 miles per hour or so. Minimum pressure of about 1,006 millibars, moving northeast at about 18 miles per hour. So it's definitely not a slow mover. It's moving at a quite high clip here, so it's not going to be sitting over one area for, let's say, a full day, but it will have probably 12 to 18 hours over one particular area, and in that area you could definitely see flooding, maybe up to 3 to 5 or even more inches of rainfall. Taking a look at the current storm track, we have tropical storm conditions that are expected to continue all throughout the duration of this track, even as it's heading up near southern Greenland. So it's expected to stay as a tropical storm. You can see that that cone track takes it through central North Carolina into parts of the Delmarva, off the shore of New Jersey, and then into southeastern New England, and then eventually moving into southeastern Canada, where it eventually will move into the northern Atlantic. So that's the general track that we're expecting according to the National Hurricane Center. If you want a bit of a closer look on where the tropical storm warnings and watches are up right now, you can see it a little bit more clearly here. So if you want to, you can pause the video right here to see where your county is on here. We also have flood watches, and again, those are mainly for those counties that are a little bit further interior of the coast, and then we have that tornado watch further to the south, which we are still going to be talking about. taking a look at the satellite imagery, you can see it is actually quite an impressive storm. It is getting kind of mixed in with the cloud cover, which is to the north. This is not associated to the north with Elsa, but this is the center of your storm right here. But you can see where the convective activity is. It's on the northeastern side of this. So wherever this tracks, it's going to be to the north and east of there where the main impacts would actually be. So wherever this tracks, it's not really going to be those areas that are south of there or to the west of there that are really going to be impacted. You're going to want to get on that northeastern side of the storm, and that's where we're going to feel the brunt of these impacts. Taking a look at the current radar, you can see that even though the storm is located in northern South Carolina, look at the rainfall. Barely anything in South Carolina, but then you go up into North Carolina, and we're actually dealing with some severe storms where we have the possibility of getting some tornadoes in these areas. Looking at the tornado watch in detail, you can see it covers much of eastern North Carolina. We have a moderate risk of tornadoes, a low risk of EF2 plus tornadoes, and a very low risk of wind and hail related impacts. So it's mainly just a tornado risk. We could definitely see one or two or even three or a couple more of these tornadoes pop up over the next couple of hours. This was issued at 8:35 a.m. Eastern time. It expires at 3 p.m. Eastern time today, and who knows, they might even extend that a little bit further to the north. Would not be surprised if they extend that into eastern Virginia, maybe even into the southern Delmarva over the next couple of hours. Taking a look at the rainfall. Now, there's an interesting thing that does set up where you can see, again, it's going to be areas that are just inland of the coast. So you see right along the coast, we're not dealing with a whole lot of rainfall. So eastern North Carolina through into southeastern New England, not a lot of rainfall, maybe up to 2 inches at most. And then it's that corridor that I would say is just inland of the coast. That's where we're dealing with 2 to 4 inches. And I would even say a few spots could see 4 to 6 inches of rainfall in a couple of these spots. So we're definitely looking at most of the rainfall impacts a little bit further to the west than where most of the wind impacts will be, which would be right along the coastal areas. Taking a look at the chances of flash flooding, you can see that we have a 10% slight risk all along the east coast for the most part, and then we have a 20% moderate risk in parts of Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, through Connecticut, New York, and also into parts of New Jersey as well. And that's where we have a moderate risk of flash flooding. Most of that is going to come on Friday and Saturday. Nothing really for Sunday. Sunday actually looks like a fairly good day that we're not going to have too many issues. Most of the issues will be up into southeastern Canada by that point. Taking a look at the chances of tropical storm force winds, we do have a rather high chance if you live fairly close to the coast. I would say if you live within 25 miles of the coast, you do want to be paying attention for the chance of seeing some strong gusty winds. If you live in the southeast or mid-Atlantic, that area would expand to areas that are even closer to 50 miles inland of the coast. So if you're even remotely close to the coastal waters, you're going to want to watch out for this because it's going to be areas right along the ocean that's going to be impacted with the majority of the winds and severe weather out of this event. Taking a look at the track from the model guidance, you can see that we're fairly certain on where this is going to go up until it hits about the northeast. Then it does start to spread out a little bit, and we have a couple questions whether this may recurve as an extratropical storm into areas like Portugal and Spain, or whether this will just continue up through Greenland and potentially hit Iceland as, again, an extratropical and very weak storm by that point. So we have a couple of issues there into Europe with this potential storm. We have a few track issues, but we really aren't expecting any major impacts no matter where this would track in Europe. So it's going to be a fairly weak storm either way by that point. Looking at the intensity guidance, it is expected to strengthen a little bit over the next few hours, and then we're expecting that as it moves closer to the northeast into a bit of a colder area of water, it should weaken back down into a low and tropical storm, and who knows, maybe even down into a tropical depression. taking a look at the maximum wind gusts out of this event. This is in these are the maximum wind gusts in knots. So the hurricane force wind speeds are 64 knots. You can actually see that popping up in a few of these spots. Ocean City, Maryland would be one area. So eastern Maryland, southeastern Delaware, and then another area would be southeastern Massachusetts, where we have Cape Cod, that kind of area that juts out into the Atlantic. That storm is going to go right over there. So that's another area where we could be dealing with a lot of impacts from the winds. And then even if you're a bit inland of the coast, again, up to 25 miles inland of the coast, you're still dealing with winds that are above tropical storm force, which is in that yellow or orange shade. Anything that's above there is above tropical storm force winds. So you can see that pretty much overlays with where they have those tropical storm warnings. So we're dealing with fairly gusty winds. By the way, about 64 knots, which is hurricane force wind speeds, is about 74 miles per hour. So that's really high. That could definitely cause some issues with damage to objects and structures in that area. So definitely watch out, especially if you live along the immediate coast in areas like the Delmarva or also into southeastern Massachusetts. Anywhere that's very close to the ocean does have the threat of seeing some damaging winds. Let's time this out for you guys now with the simulated radar on the NAM 3KM model. You can see that that storm is currently down into the Carolinas. That's going to be moving up over the next couple of hours. So here's by 3 p.m. today. It's now into the center of the storm is now into central North Carolina. It's moving up into parts of Virginia and Maryland with the rainfall by this point. We do have some thunderstorm activity to the north into parts of Pennsylvania and New York ahead of this storm. You could definitely see a few isolated storms. We have, I believe, a marginal risk in this area for today for severe weather. So definitely, we're not ruling that out. They might even upgrade that to a slight risk for today. If we look at for later tonight, so around 6 p.m. Eastern, we're looking at these storms mostly into the Delmarva, Eastern Virginia, Eastern Maryland, that general area where we're dealing with mostly just scattered rainfall. It's now going to start to kind of merge with a front that's going by to the north, where we have most of the steady rain in through the northeast, and then just to the north of the storm. By the way, the low pressure center is right in here by this point. Just to the north of the storm, we're dealing with the convective activity. The rest of this area in the northeast just dealing with plain rain by this point. Now let's center over to the northeast a little bit better. You're starting to see convective activity into areas like Maryland and Delaware, and even into parts of southern New Jersey by this point. Then it's moving through parts of, now the center, by the way, is moving through parts of Maryland and Delaware right here. And most of the convective activity, again, is going to be to the north of there. So it would be in areas like northern Delaware, northern Maryland, into New Jersey, and even a few spots further to the north of there. The rest of the northeast still just dealing with a plain rain, especially into areas like New England. This would be by 3 in the morning tomorrow. If we look at 6 in the afternoon, 6 in the morning, for tomorrow morning, you're dealing with still some of these gusty winds, especially, again, just to the east of the storm. So wherever the storm is centered, just to the east of there is where we're dealing with the gusty winds. And then we're dealing with thunderstorms in parts of New Jersey and New York by this point. So we could potentially be dealing with some convective activity by 9 in the morning. You can clearly see where the center of this is developing. You almost have an eye shape in parts of off the shore of parts of Long Island. So it is definitely strengthening by this point. We're starting to see a little bit of a wall of rainfall start to go around the center of the storm, and that's heading right into southeastern Massachusetts. So it's going to make a track like this, but again, areas to the south and east of the storm is where we're dealing with the impact. So it would be this area right here where we're actually dealing with the majority of the winds and also the biggest impacts out of the storm, unfortunately. So then you can see that by 12 in the afternoon tomorrow, we're dealing with just some heavy, moderate rainfall in these areas. It'll be fairly steady, nothing really too convective, but you're still dealing with the big issue of wind by this point. It then moves into the Gulf of Maine, so now parts of New Hampshire and Maine are dealing with the heaviest rainfall, and then eventually that heaviest rainfall goes up into far eastern Maine, where we're dealing with most of that heavy rainfall, and then eventually it's up into areas like Nova Scotia and Quebec, Canada, with most of that rainfall by that point. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Tomorrow I will have most likely my first winter discussion of this year. So we're just going to be talking about generally my thoughts on the winter season, what could possibly happen. I want to have a few more of those scattered throughout the month. So maybe I'll do one once every week or once every couple of weeks as we get more information. And I'll probably have my first winter forecast probably, I would say, by the first week of August or so, or maybe even the second week of August. So we're going to be doing the winter forecast in the middle or early part of August, and we'll have a couple more after that, and then we're going to have our first winter discussion in tomorrow's video. So we're going to be talking about the longer range pattern, and we're even going to be talking about just some of these signs and signals that are kind of pointing me towards what I'm thinking about the upcoming winter pattern. So I'm not going to give anything away just yet, but we're going to mainly just be discussing the longer range pattern in that video. So again, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.